The morning sun filtered through my kitchen curtains like it always did. Soft, golden, familiar. I stood at the counter slicing strawberries for breakfast, humming quietly to myself. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air, mingling with the scent of cinnamon toast warming in the oven. Somewhere upstairs I could hear the shower running. Araceli was getting ready for the day. My grandson Matthew's laughter echoed from the living room where he played with his toy planes, making swooshing sounds and pretending to be just like his Uncle Ivan. This was my life, peaceful, predictable, safe. I had been a widow for 7 years now, and in that time I'd learned to find comfort in routines. The morning coffee ritual, the sound of my grandchild's laughter, the warmth of family filling every corner of this old house. My husband left me with 2 wonderful sons, Stephen, my eldest, who married Araceli 5 years ago, and Ivan, my youngest, a commercial airline pilot who still called me every chance he got between flights. They were my world, my reason for waking up every morning with gratitude instead of grief. And Araceli, she had become like the daughter I never had, kind, gentle, always helping around the house without being asked. She and Stephen lived with me, along with little Matthew, and honestly, I couldn't have asked for a better daughter-in-law. She remembered how I liked my tea. She listened to my stories about their father without checking her phone. She made this house feel like a home again after so many years of silence. My phone buzzed on the counter, vibrating against the marble. Ivan's name lit up the screen with his contact photo, him grinning in his pilot uniform. I smiled and wiped my hands on my apron before answering. "Morning, sweetheart," I said warmly, cradling the phone against my shoulder. "Hey, Mom." His voice sounded strange, tight, strained like he was forcing the words out. Not his usual cheerful tone at all. "Everything okay? You sound off." There was a pause, a long one that made my stomach twist. I could hear the airport announcements in the background. Muffled voices over intercoms, the distant hum of jet engines, the rolling of luggage wheels on polished floors. "Mom, where's Araceli right now?" I blinked, confused by the random question. "Upstairs, in the shower. I can hear the water running." "Why are you asking?" Another pause, longer this time, heavier. My heartbeat quickened, a strange anxiety creeping up my spine. "Ivan, what's going on?" "Mom?" His voice dropped to almost a whisper, like he didn't want anyone else to hear. "That's impossible." "What do you mean impossible?" "Because I'm standing at gate 42 right now, and Araceli is on my flight. She's boarding a plane to Paris as we speak." "Mom, I'm looking right at her." The knife slipped from my hand and clattered onto the cutting board. My breath caught in my throat like I'd swallowed ice. That's not possible. She's here. She's been here all morning. I made her coffee an hour ago. Mom, I know what I'm seeing. It's her. Same face, same hair, same walk, same everything. She just walked past me not 10 feet away. My mind scrambled for logic, for an explanation that made sense in this suddenly senseless world. Maybe it's someone who looks like her? You know, a doppelganger? A coincidence? Mom, it's not a coincidence. It's her. I'd bet my life on it. I turned toward the staircase, my legs suddenly weak, my hand gripping the counter for support. The water was still running upstairs. I could hear it clearly, the familiar sound of our old pipes rattling slightly, the splash against the tile. "Ivan, I don't understand what you're telling me." "Neither do I." His voice cracked with emotion. "But something's not right here, Mom. Something's very, very wrong. I have to board now, but I'll call you the second I land in Paris. Don't say anything to anyone yet. Not to Stephen, not to her. Promise me." "I promise," I whispered, though I didn't know why I was promising or what I was protecting. The line went dead. I stood there in my kitchen, phone still pressed to my ear, the world tilting beneath my feet like the floor had turned to water. If Araceli was here, then who was the woman on Yvonne's flight? I couldn't move for what felt like an eternity. My thoughts spun in wild, impossible circles, each more frightening than the last. It didn't make sense. None of it made sense. But Yvonne wouldn't lie. He was a trained pilot, observant by profession, careful with details. He wouldn't make something like this up, wouldn't call me with such urgency over a simple case of mistaken identity. And yet I could hear the shower. I could hear Matthew playing. Everything seemed normal. The same morning routine we'd followed for years, except it wasn't normal. Not anymore. I needed to think. I needed to remember. I needed to piece together what I might have missed. Araceli had been part of our family for 5 years. Stephen met her at a charity fundraiser downtown. She was volunteering at the registration table, soft-spoken and graceful, with dark eyes that seemed to hold the weight of the world. He told me later that he fell for her the moment she smiled at him, this shy, genuine smile that made him forget every other woman he'd ever known. Within a year, they were married in a small ceremony at the church where I'd married their father. She wore a simple white dress and carried wildflowers. She cried during her vows. She moved into my home like she'd always belonged there. She cooked with me, tried my mother's old recipes, asked questions about family traditions. She played endless games of hide-and-seek with Matthew, read him bedtime stories in different character voices, never complained when he woke her up too early on weekends. She listened to my stories about their father, the man she'd never met, but somehow seemed to understand through my words. She was perfect, attentive, loving, devoted, maybe too perfect. I sank into a chair at the kitchen table, my hands trembling against the wood. I thought back to all the little moments I'd brushed aside, the small inconsistencies that I'd explained away with excuses, the times her handwriting looked completely different on grocery lists. One week flowing and elegant, the next week cramped and hurried. I'd told myself she was tired, stressed, rushing. The days she seemed warmer, more affectionate, cuddling with Matthew on the couch, laughing at Stephen's jokes, asking me about my day with genuine interest. And then others when she was distant, almost cold, barely making eye contact, retreating to the bedroom early with claims of headaches. I'd chalked it up to hormones, to the pressures of motherhood, to the normal ebb and flow of life and mood. But what if it wasn't normal? What if I'd been living with a lie, and I was too blind to see it? My mind drifted back further, to the day Stephen first brought her home to meet me. She'd been so nervous, fidgeting with her hands, barely meeting my eyes when I asked her questions about her family, her background, her life before Stephen. She'd smiled, and it was such a genuine smile that immediately put me at ease. I remembered thinking, this is the woman my son needs. Someone gentle, someone kind, but there were other memories too. Memories that didn't quite fit the picture I'd painted in my mind, like the time she forgot Matthew's favorite bedtime story, the one she'd read to him every single night for months. The little blue truck. He'd asked for it, and she'd stared at the bookshelf like she'd never seen it before. "Which one is that again?" she'd asked. Matthew had looked confused. So had I, but I'd laughed it off. "Mommy's tired, sweetie." Or when she flinched at the sound of Stephen's voice calling her from the other room, as if she didn't recognize it, as if for a split second she didn't know who he was. She'd recovered quickly, smiled, answered him. But I'd seen that flicker of confusion in her eyes, or the way she sometimes stared at our family photos on the mantel like she was seeing them for the first time, studying faces she should have known by heart. Once I caught her picking up our wedding photo, mine and my husband's, and she'd asked, "What was his name again?" I'd been so shocked I'd just stared at her. She'd laughed nervously. "Sorry, I'm so scattered today." Of course I remember, but did she? I had dismissed it all, told myself I was imagining things, being paranoid, reading too much into innocent moments. We all forget things. We all have off days. But now, sitting in the stillness of my kitchen with Ivan's words echoing in my mind, I couldn't ignore it anymore. The pieces I'd refused to put together were finally forming a picture I didn't want to see. The shower stopped. I heard footsteps upstairs, the creak of the floorboards in the hallway. My heart hammered in my chest like it was trying to escape. She came down a few minutes later, her hair damp and loose around her shoulders, wearing a soft blue sweater that brought out her eyes. She smiled at me, that same warm smile I'd grown to love. "Morning, Stella." "Coffee smells amazing," I forced a smile back, hoping she couldn't see my hands shaking. "Morning." She moved around the kitchen with complete ease, pouring herself a cup, adding exactly the right amount of cream, checking on Matthew, who was now building a tower of blocks. Everything about her seemed normal, familiar, safe, but I watched her differently now. I studied the way she held the mug, the way she laughed at Matthew's jokes, the way her eyes flickered toward the window like she was expecting something, or someone. Was I losing my mind? Or had I been blind all these years, living with a stranger and calling her family? Over the next few days, I couldn't let it go. The conversation with Ivan played on repeat in my mind like a broken record. I tried to act normal, tried to go about my daily routines, but everything felt different now. The house that had always felt like a sanctuary now felt like a stage, and I was watching a performance I couldn't quite understand. I started paying attention, really paying attention, to every detail, every gesture, every word that came out of Araceli's mouth. And the more I watched, the more I saw. Things I'd overlooked for years suddenly stood out like cracks in a perfect painting. Her handwriting changed. Not slightly, completely, dramatically. One day her grocery list was neat and looped, the letters flowing into each other like calligraphy. The next, it was jagged and rushed, barely legible, the letters separated and sharp. I held both lists side by side, my heart pounding, trying to find a logical explanation. When I asked her about it casually while we were folding laundry, she'd laughed it off. Oh, I was in such a hurry that day. Matthew was crying, and I just scribbled it down. But it wasn't just hurried. It was different. Like two different people had written them. And it wasn't only the handwriting. There were days when she was incredibly affectionate with Matthew, reading to him for hours, building elaborate block castles, taking him to the park, and pushing him on the swings until her arms were tired. She'd come home glowing, talking about his laughter, his imagination, his sweetness. Those were the days when I thought, she's such a wonderful mother. But then there were other days. Days when she barely looked at him, when his questions annoyed her, when she'd hand him a tablet and retreat to the bedroom, closing the door, when she'd snap at him for making too much noise or spilling his juice. Those days, Matthew would come to me with confused eyes. "Is Mommy mad at me, Grandma?" "No, sweetheart," I'd say, hugging him close. "Mommy's just tired." But tired didn't explain the complete shift in personality. It felt like watching two different women inhabit the same body. I started keeping a journal. I know it sounds paranoid, maybe even crazy, but I needed to document what I was seeing. I needed proof that I wasn't imagining things. Every night after everyone went to bed, I'd sit at my desk and write down the inconsistencies, the strange moments, the things that didn't add up. October 3rd. Araceli forgot our neighbor Mrs. Patterson's name today. She's known her for 5 years. We see her every week, October 5th. She hesitated when Stephen asked her where they went on their first date. She finally said, the Italian place downtown, but he corrected her. It was the seafood restaurant by the pier. October 7th. She called Stephen Steve 3 times today. He hates being called Steve. She knows that. Why would she suddenly start using it? October 9th. She made Matthew's lunch wrong, peanut butter and jelly. He's allergic to peanuts. She knows this. I caught her just in time. The list grew longer. Each entry made my hands shake more. Each observation pushed me closer to a truth I didn't want to face. And then there was the day I ran into Clara, our neighbor from down the street. She stopped me in the driveway as I was getting the mail, her face full of concern, her voice low like she was sharing a secret. "Stella, can I ask you something?" "Of course, Clara. What is it?" She glanced toward my house, then back at me. "Is everything okay with Araceli?" My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" I don't know how to say this without sounding strange, but she just seems different lately. Really different. Sometimes she waves and stops to chat with me about the weather, asks about my grandkids, remembers their names. We'll have these lovely conversations. But other times, sometimes the very next day, she walks right past me like I'm invisible. Like she doesn't even know me. I've tried saying hello and she just stares at me blankly and keeps walking. My blood ran cold. My voice came out barely above a whisper. "When did you first notice this?" Clara thought for a moment, her brow furrowed. "Oh, honestly? It's been going on for a while now. Months, maybe longer. At first I thought maybe I'd offended her somehow, or she was going through something personal. But it's so inconsistent. It's like she has a twin or something." She laughed nervously at her own joke. I didn't laugh. "Yeah," I managed to say, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack my face. "She's been under a lot of stress. Work stuff, family stuff. You know how it is?" Clara nodded sympathetically. "Of course. We all have those days. I just wanted to make sure everything was all right." "Everything's fine," I lied. But as I walked back to the house, Clara's words echoed in my mind. It's like she has a twin or something. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the old house settle and creak, my thoughts a tangled mess of fear and confusion. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Aracelli's face. But which Araceli? The warm one or the cold one? The loving mother or the distant stranger? I began to fear that the woman in my house wasn't Araceli at all, or worse, that sometimes she was and sometimes she wasn't, and I had no idea which version I was living with on any given day. The next morning, I made a decision. I couldn't live like this anymore, suspended in doubt, drowning in questions, watching my own daughter-in-law like she was a suspect in some crime I couldn't name. I had to know the truth, whatever it was, however terrible it might be. I waited until Araceli announced she was going to the market. It was a Saturday, and Stephen had taken Matthew to the Children's Museum downtown, so it was just the two of us in the house. She grabbed her purse, a brown leather one I'd given her last Christmas, and headed for the door. "Need anything specific, Stella?" she asked, pausing in the doorway, keys jangling in her hand. "No, sweetheart, just the usual. Take your time." She smiled and left. I watched through the window as she got into her car, backed out of the driveway, and disappeared down the street. I gave her exactly 5 minutes. 5 minutes to get far enough away that she wouldn't notice me. Then I grabbed my own keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get them into the ignition, and followed. My heart pounded as I drove, staying, several car lengths behind, feeling like a character in some ridiculous detective movie. But this wasn't a movie. This was my life, my family, and something was terribly, terribly wrong. She didn't go toward the market, not even close. Instead, she drove through the center of town, past the shops and cafes, past the park where we'd celebrated Matthew's birthdays, and turned down a street I didn't recognize. The buildings grew older, more run down. Paint peeled from shutters. Chain-link fences surrounded overgrown yards. This wasn't a neighborhood I'd ever seen her go to before. My pulse quickened. Where was she going? She turned again, down an even, narrower street, barely more than an alley, really, and parked in front of a house that looked like it hadn't been maintained in decades. The siding was gray and weathered, the porch sagged in the middle, and one of the windows was covered with cardboard. I parked further back, partially hidden behind a delivery van, and watched. Araceli glanced around nervously, left, right, over, her shoulder, like she was checking to make sure no one was watching. Then she hurried up the creaking steps and slipped inside, closing the door quickly behind her. I sat frozen in my car, barely breathing. What was this place? Who lived here? Why would she come to a place like this instead of the market? 10 minutes passed. 15. I counted every second, my imagination running wild with possibilities, each one worse than the last. Then the door opened. She stepped out, but something was different, completely different. Her clothes had changed. She'd gone in wearing the blue sweater and jeans. Now she wore a gray jacket I'd never seen before and dark pants. Her hair, which had been down, was now pulled back in a ponytail. Even her posture seemed different, more rigid, less confident. I blinked hard, wondering if I was seeing things, if my stressed mind was playing tricks on me. But no. This was real. She, or whoever she was, got into the car and drove away in the opposite direction. I didn't follow her. I couldn't. My mind was spinning too fast, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles were white. Nothing made sense. How could she change clothes that fast? Why would she? What was happening in that house? I drove home in a daze, my brain struggling to process what I'd just witnessed, and when I walked through my front door 20 minutes later, there she was. Araceli, standing in the kitchen, wearing the blue sweater and jeans. "Hey, Stella," she said cheerfully, holding up a grocery bag with the store logo clearly visible. "Got everything we needed. They had those tomatoes you like on sale. I stared at her, my throat completely dry, my heart hammering so hard I thought she must be able to hear it. She looked at me with concern. You okay? You look pale. I'm fine, I managed to croak. Just need some water. She poured me a glass, handed it to me with that warm smile. Here, sit down for a minute. I sat. I drank. I tried to make sense of the impossible. How was she here? I'd just seen her, or someone who looked exactly like her, leave that house in different clothes and drive away. Had I imagined it? Was I having some kind of breakdown? No. I knew what I saw. She looked exactly like my daughter-in-law, but her eyes held something I couldn't name. Something that made my skin crawl. Fear, guilt, secrets. That night I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that rundown house, that narrow alley, that figure emerging in different clothes. The next morning, I knew what I had to do. I had to go back. I had to know who or what was in that house, so I did. Alone this time. No following, no hiding. I drove straight to that address, parked right in front, walked up those sagging steps, and knocked on the door. My heart hammered in my chest as I waited. An old woman answered. Her face was deeply lined, her eyes cloudy with age, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped the doorframe. She looked at me with confusion. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice rough but kind. "I'm looking for someone," I said, my voice shaking. "A woman. She came here. Yesterday. And other days, I think." The old woman's face softened with something that looked like sadness. Deep, aching sadness. "You must mean Isadora." "Isadora?" I repeated. The name meant nothing to me. She nodded slowly. "You'd better come in." I stepped inside. The house smelled of old wood and medicine and something else I couldn't identify. Resignation, maybe. The living room was small and dark, filled with mismatched furniture and faded photographs on the walls. And in the corner, sitting in an old armchair with a blanket over her lap, was a woman. When she looked up at me, I nearly collapsed. She had Araceli's face, exactly every feature, every line, every tiny detail. The same dark eyes, the same shape of her lips. The same small scar above her left eyebrow that Araceli had told me she got falling off a bike as a child. Who are you?" I whispered, my legs barely holding me up. She stood slowly, fear flickering in her eyes like a candle about to go out. "My name is Isadora." The old woman, who introduced herself as Lucy, guided me gently to a chair. I couldn't stop staring. It was like looking at Araceli, but different somehow. Softer, sadder, more fragile. "I don't understand," I said, my voice breaking. "I don't understand any of this." Lucy sighed, sitting down across from me, her old bones creaking. "Isadora is Araceli's twin sister." The room spun. The air left my lungs. "Twin," I whispered. Isadora nodded, tears already forming in her eyes. "We were separated at birth, adopted by different families. I only found out about her a few years ago." I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, couldn't process what I was hearing. Twin sister? How was that possible? How had Araceli never mentioned this? How had none of us known? "Tell me everything," I finally managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. Lucy poured me a cup of tea with shaking hands while Isadora sat back down, pulling the blanket tighter around herself like she was trying to disappear into it. "We were born in a small town," Isadora began, her voice soft and trembling. "Our mother was very young, very poor. She couldn't take care of both of us, so she made a choice. She kept Araceli and gave me up for adoption. My heart broke for her, for both of them. I grew up not knowing I had a sister. My adoptive parents were kind, but they died when I was 17. After that, I struggled. I worked whatever jobs I could find, but I got sick, really sick." She gestured vaguely to herself, to her thin frame, her pale skin. I needed treatments, medicine, things I couldn't afford. And then Araceli found you? I asked. Isadora nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. 3 years ago. She'd been searching for her birth family, hired someone to help her. When she found out about me, she came here. I was so happy. I thought I finally had family again, but, I prompted, sensing there was more. So much more. But she didn't come because she missed me, or wanted a relationship, Isadora said, her voice cracking with pain. She came because she needed me. She had a plan. Lucy took over, placing a gentle hand on Isadora's shoulder. Araceli told Isadora she was in love with another man, a wealthy man named Dominic, someone she'd met a year after marrying Stephen. She wanted to be with him, to travel with him, to live the life he could give her. But she couldn't leave her marriage without losing everything, the security, the family, the reputation. My stomach turned. So she used Isadora. She offered me money, Isadora whispered, shame flooding her face. Enough to pay for my treatments, to keep me alive. All I had to do was pretend to be her sometimes. When she wanted to be with Dominic, I would take her place at your house. Be the wife, be the mother. The room tilted. I gripped the armrest of my chair to steady myself. At first it was just a day here and there, Lucy continued. Araceli would tell you she was going shopping or visiting a friend, and Isadora would come to your home afterward, pretending she'd been there all along. No one noticed because they look identical. But then it became more frequent. Weekends, sometimes whole weeks. The Paris trip, I breathed, suddenly understanding. That's why Ivan saw her on his flight. Isadora nodded miserably. She goes to Paris often. Dominic has a home there, an apartment overlooking the Seine. She's shown me pictures, told me about the restaurants, the clothes he buys her. She lives 2 completely different lives. I felt sick, physically sick. And you just went along with this? You pretended to be her? To be Matthew's mother? Fresh tears poured down Isadora's face. I didn't want to. I hated it. Every time I held Matthew, every time I sat at your table, every time Stephen looked at me with love in his eyes meant for her, not me. I wanted to tell the truth. But I was dying, Mrs. Stella. Without that money, without those treatments, I would die. She knew that. She used it. Isadora has a good heart, Lucy said firmly. She never wanted to hurt anyone. But Araceli gave her no choice. She manipulated her, controlled her, threatened to cut her off if she didn't cooperate. I looked at this fragile woman, this victim, and felt anger and compassion warring inside me. Anger at Araceli for her cruelty, her lies, her manipulation, and compassion for Isadora, trapped in an impossible situation, forced to betray strangers just to survive. Did she coach you? I asked. On how to act, what to say? Isadora nodded. She gave me notebooks, details about your family, Matthew's favorite foods, Stephen's work schedule, your routines, stories I should know. But there was so much. I couldn't remember everything. Sometimes I'd forget and make mistakes. The handwriting, I said, pieces clicking into place. Matthew's bedtime stories. The neighbors. I tried my best, Isadora sobbed. I really did, but I'm not her. I could never be her. Lucy handed her a tissue. Araceli would call her sometimes, screaming at her for messing up, for saying the wrong thing, for acting too nervous. She was cruel, vicious even. Where is she now? I asked. The real Araceli. Right now, at this moment, Paris, Isadora whispered. She left 3 days ago. I've been at your house since then, pretending. She's supposed to come back tomorrow and we'll switch again. We always meet here. I give her updates, she gives me more instructions, more money, my hands clenched into fists. The betrayal was so deep, so calculated, so monstrous that I could barely contain the rage building inside me. And Stephen? I asked quietly. My son. Does he know any of this? Isadora shook her head frantically. No one knows except Lucy. Araceli was so careful. She said if anyone ever found out, she'd make sure I went to jail. She said I'd be arrested for fraud, for identity theft, that I'd lose everything and die in prison. You won't, I said firmly, looking her in the eyes. I promise you, Isadora, you won't go to jail. You're a victim in this too. She looked at me with such desperate hope that it broke my heart all over again. I need proof, I said, turning to Lucy. Evidence. Something concrete that I can show my sons. Phone records, messages, anything, Lucy nodded. Araceli keeps a phone here. A second phone she uses to communicate with Dominic. She leaves it here when she's at your house. Isadora, where is it? Isadora pointed to a drawer in the small table beside her chair. I opened it and pulled out a smartphone. When I turned it on, there were no passwords, no locks, just hundreds of messages between Araceli and someone named D. I scrolled through them, my stomach churning with each line. Can't wait to see you in Paris, 2 weeks away from that boring life. Stephen suspects nothing. Isadora played her part perfectly. One day I'll leave him for good. Just need to secure the finances first. Matthew doesn't even notice when it's her instead of me. Children are so stupid. That last message made me want to throw the phone across the room. How could she say that about her own son? How could anyone be so heartless? Can I take this? I asked. Lucy nodded. Take whatever you need. We just want this to end. Isadora is exhausted. She's been living in fear for 3 years. I looked at Isadora, this broken, manipulated woman who wore my daughter-in-law's face but had none of her cruelty. It's going to end, I promised her. Very soon, and you're going to be free. I left that house with the phone clutched in my hand, my mind already forming a plan. Araceli had lied to us, used us, betrayed us in ways I never thought possible, but she'd made one critical mistake. She'd underestimated me, and now she was going to face the truth. I spent the next 2 days planning. I called Ivan first, told him everything I'd discovered. He was furious. I could hear him pacing on the other end of the line, breathing hard, cursing under his breath. I knew something was wrong, he said. I knew it the moment I saw her on that flight. Mom, we have to tell Stephen. We will, I said. But not over the phone. Not like this. He needs to see the proof. He needs to see her face when she's confronted with the truth. What do you need me to do? I need you to come home. And bring those flight records. Every single one that shows Araceli traveling when she was supposedly at home with us. I'll be there tomorrow. Next, I called Lucy. When does Araceli come back? Tomorrow evening, she said. She's supposed to meet Isadora here at 6 to switch. Tell Isadora not to come. Tell her to stay hidden. I'll handle everything from here. Are you sure? I'm sure. Then I called Stephen. My heart ached as I heard his voice, so trusting, so loving, so completely unaware that his world was about to shatter. Can you come home for dinner tomorrow night? I asked, keeping my voice steady. I need the whole family together. Of course, Mom. Is everything okay? It will be, I said quietly. It will be. The next evening, I set the table with care. Candles flickered in the center. The smell of roasted chicken filled the air. I'd made all of Stephen's favorite dishes: garlic mashed potatoes, honey-glazed carrots, homemade rolls. If this was going to be the night our family broke apart, I wanted one last good meal together. Stephen arrived with Araceli and Matthew just after 6. She was in a good mood, smiling, laughing, telling stories about Matthew's day at preschool. She kissed my cheek when she came in, complimented the food, helped set out the dishes. The perfect daughter-in-law, the perfect lie. Ivan was already there, sitting at the table with his jaw clenched tight, his eyes hard as stone. When Araceli saw him, she barely reacted. Oh, Ivan, I didn't know you'd be here. How was Paris? He didn't smile back. Interesting. We all sat down, made small talk, passed the food around. Araceli filled her plate, chatted about the weather, asked about Ivan's flights. She was so convincing, so comfortable in her deception. And then I stood. There's someone I'd like you all to meet. Stephen looked confused. What? I walked to the door and opened it. Isadora stepped inside. The room went completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. A heartbeat, a breath. Stephen's fork clattered onto his plate. His face drained of all color. He looked from Araceli to Isadora and back again, his mouth opening and closing like he couldn't form words. Araceli froze, her hand halfway to her glass. For one brief moment, I saw pure terror flash across her face before she covered it with anger. What is this? Stephen stammered. What's going on? Why are there two? Her name is Isadora, I said calmly. She's Araceli's twin sister, and for the past 3 years, your wife has been using her to live a double life. That's insane, Araceli snapped, standing abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Mom, I don't know what kind of sick joke this is, but it's not a joke, Ivan interrupted, pulling out the flight records and laying them on the table. These are passenger manifests from my airline. Araceli Rodriguez. Multiple flights to Paris, Flights that occurred on dates when you were supposedly here, at home, with the family. Stephen picked up the papers with shaking hands, scanning them. His face crumpled as the truth sank in. "Tell him," I said to Araceli. "Tell him the truth. I don't have to tell him anything," she screamed. "Then I will," Isadora said quietly, stepping forward. "I'm sorry, Stephen. I'm so sorry. But she paid me. She paid me to pretend to be her while she went to Paris to be with another man. His name is Dominic. She's been seeing him for 3 years. Stephen looked at Araceli, his eyes filled with disbelief and devastation. "Is this true?" For a long moment she said nothing. She just stood there, her mask finally cracking, her face twisting with anger and something else, something ugly and cold. "Yes," she finally hissed. "Yes, it's true. And you want to know why? Because I never loved you, Stephen. I never did. I married you for security, for money, for a comfortable life. But when I met Dominic, I finally felt alive. Really alive. So yes, I used her. I used Isadora. I used all of you, and honestly, I'd do it again." The silence that followed was suffocating. Stephen's face crumpled completely. Tears streamed down his cheeks. Matthew, sitting in his chair, started crying too, sensing something terrible was happening, even if he didn't understand what. Araceli grabbed her purse from the counter and stormed toward the door. She paused, looked back at me with pure venom in her eyes. "You think you've won?" she hissed. "You've destroyed nothing. I'm finally free now." And then she was gone. The door slammed shut. The sound echoed through the house like a final, brutal goodbye. She walked out into the night, taking her lies with her. In the weeks that followed, Stephen filed for divorce. It was painful, watching my son grieve the life he thought he had, the woman he thought he loved. But pain, I learned, is how we make room for truth. Isadora stayed close. Not as a replacement, not as a substitute, but as herself. And slowly, beautifully, she became part of our family, the real one, built on honesty instead of lies. She was gentle with Matthew, patient with Stephen, and grateful in a way that broke and healed my heart at the same time. She helped around the house without being asked. She read to Matthew with genuine love in her voice, and when Stephen looked at her, he didn't see Araceli anymore. He saw someone real, someone true. One evening, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. Isadora sat beside me, wrapped in a blanket, her face peaceful in a way I'd never seen before. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not hating me." I smiled and took her hand. "You were a victim too, sweetheart." She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks, but they were different tears now. Healing tears. I looked out at the fading light and realized something profound. Sometimes God breaks us apart, only to rebuild us stronger in truth. My family wasn't perfect, but it was honest now, and that was enough. That was everything. Did you like my story? Which city are you listening from?